All right, guys, let's get started. My name is Phani Pandrangi. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Key. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of cloud and IoT, cloud and mobile apps in IoT. So thanks for All Scene Alliance guys inviting me to speak in their track here. First, before we kind of talk about cloud and mobile apps in IoT, I just want to give you the customary introduction to Key because I work there. Before we get to kind of what Key does and Key platform, just a little bit about components of a typical IoT solution. As you guys know, most of the IoT solutions, irrespective of what type of segment you're talking about, smart homes, smart cities, smart buildings, smart whatever, most of the time the components look something like this. You have your sensors and devices. Some cases they connect to the middleware through gateways, and then there's middleware, and then there are apps and services on top. And of course, there are lots of different connectivity things going on depending on whether it is between sensors and gateways or gateways and middleware and things like that. This is your typical components of an IoT solution. And what we do at Key is essentially enable all these three layers, the sensors, devices, and gateway, that layer, the middleware layer, and then the apps and services layer through our platform. So our platform is three layers. The bottom layer is what goes into devices, sensors, and gateways, and cloud enables them basically. So through these device agents that go into the gateway, that go into the devices or sensors, through these device agents, you can exchange data between whatever the device is and then the cloud layer. This middle layer is really the core layer that we provide, and for any kind of IoT solution that you're developing, invariably you need to manage data, you need to manage users, you need to manage devices, do analytics, do optimization. All of these services or functionality is provided, through this middle layer. It's a cloud-based backend layer with analytics functionality as well. And then the third layer is basically the API layer. So that's how you expose all of this to your app developers, to your service developers for the external integrations and so on and so forth. So these are sort of the three layers that we provide in the platform. And when you're creating an IoT solution, basically there are these four things that we enable. Like first is cloud enablement of like the devices, services, gateways. And then we provide these APIs and SDKs so that you can create services and apps. And then the third is basically to remotely manage these devices, control them, the data and everything. And then fourth is analyze and optimize. So I'll come to some of these a little bit later. But essentially, this is what we do with our platform. Now, a little bit about Key. So I already introduced briefly the platform. So we provide an IoT platform. In addition to that, we have created an ecosystem that I'll touch upon a little bit later. That we believe that it's not just a platform that we give to you and you create an IoT solution. You need a lot more than just a platform to be successful. You need distribution, for example, for whatever IoT solution that you're doing. So from that standpoint, ecosystem is quite important. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. We are headquartered in Tokyo. I run product from Silicon Valley. So we have offices in California, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Europe, and China. And we've been around for a while. So before we were an IoT platform, the platform has been used in other contexts, and there have been customers for a long time, like Docomo, Toshiba, Kyocera. All these are customers of ours, and they've been continuing to use the platform in IoT context as well. And good investors, including Cisco. And of course, we're a member of All-Seen Alliance, and that's why the All-Seen guys invited me to speak at, in their track. Now, to the topic about cloud and mobile apps. So before we talk about cloud and mobile apps, just a little bit about the drivers for IoT. One way to look at IoT drivers in general, if you kind of think about smart cities or smart home or smart buildings or whatever, at the end of the day, the drivers are something like this. You either want to reduce costs, increase revenue, or optimize experience. So for example, things like smart lighting, you're talking about reducing, costs because of energy consumption and things like that. Things like smart parking, which is a typical example of increasing revenue. And then, smart home, a lot of, push is around optimizing experience. So these are the typical drivers. The reason I mention these drivers is later on when we talk about role of cloud and mobile apps, we'll touch upon some of these concepts because at the end of the day, why we are doing whatever it is, the IoT solution matters, and we'll come back to some of these concepts like, how to increase revenue in some of the slides later. But, I talk about smart lighting, smart parking, smart home, like all of these smarts, but where are these smarts? I showed like various blocks before, gateway, apps, services, devices, sensors, all of these. Where are the smarts? So, are the smarts here or in the middleware, in the gateway? Where are they? And the reason I'm asking this question is to kind of lead to the cloud being where one of, or a lot of the smarts are, not just because we are a cloud-based platform, but because, in many scenarios, putting the smarts of the solution there actually is very helpful. From the point of view of extensibility, from the point of view of monetization, and many, many other reasons. So let's talk about that. Excuse me. So the role cloud plays in IoT, there are many, many. I mean, I could have kind of talked about many other boxes here, but this is a good enough representation. Essentially, we are talking about, a backend. This backend could be the cloud, it could be, some other thing. But, in many, many scenarios that we see from our vantage point, cloud, putting some of the smarts of the IoT solution in the cloud enables things like this. So remote control. So a lot of scenarios, including where All-Seen is used in, say, in a proximal environment, you still want to be able to control whatever it is remotely. So you might be sitting in your office, you might want to still view what's going on at your house with your smart cam, or like you want to control the thermostat and things like that. So remote control is a pretty common use case for cloud enablement. Device integration, so a lot of times when you're talking about IoT, thank you, IoT integration between devices, there are multiple ways to integrate things. They could be integrated through something like all join in a proximal environment, but there are various IoT solutions which are not proximal, they are remote, and so if the interoperability logic is in the cloud, it just makes it very easy for you to, not only change the interoperability logic, but also, manage it and in some cases monetize, also. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Analytics, as I showed in our platform picture, analytics is a core component of our platform, but just as a use case, a lot of times the IoT solutions, they're putting all the data in the cloud, coming from different sensors, devices, apps even, and then at some point, you get to analyze data, and then maybe based on the metrics that you're seeing, some of the IoT solution might be doing some interesting things based on actual real data. Remote monitoring obviously is another role for the cloud, and it's not just monitoring of data, but it's also like diagnostic information. A lot of times, especially on the appliance vendor side, they're enabling for these appliances for IoT. Initially, mostly for diagnostic purposes. They just want to make sure that things are actually working, and if there are some things that they're seeing that might indicate a potential breakdown of the appliance, they can be more proactive on trying to do something about that. So remote monitoring, service integration, I'll talk about a specific example later to illustrate service integration. Basically, what we are talking about is, there is a IoT or wearable kind of solution, and then, at some point you want to roll out some additional features just purely on the cloud side, and all of a sudden, they just show up, like for example, there is a product that currently uses our platform called a Kid Tracker. It tracks the elementary school kids that are wearing the wearable. So initially, when that product is rolled out, it's basically, they wear the wearable, and then like if the parent can draw geofences so that like this is cool, this is an okay zone, this is words, this is not okay, and so on and so forth. If they go into the red zone, then the parents get alerts and things like that. So that was the initial product, but later, like they started doing additional service integrations on the back-end side, and they released new features. For example, sexual predator alerts. So if the kid wearing the wearable is near known sexual predator locations, that's an additional new alert that goes to the parents. Things like that are very easy to be added on the cloud side, and all of a sudden, parents get additional alerts and things like that. So this was just purely service integration that they can add on at any point. Another use case is site integration. So for example, if you have lighting, consider smart lighting. So there is a partner who basically does smart lighting at site level. So there is a company or a building which has smart lights installed here. Another building has smart lights installed over here, but these are not connected. They have no visibility into how this site and this site are being used, and like how the energy conservation is working with this config versus that config, and so on. And with cloud, they can basically do multi-site integration, even though each of these sites are basically independently kind of standalone, and they can work independently. But for additional visibility, additional sort of layering of the knowledge, they use cloud-based integration. Operations is a pretty big deal as well. So when you're building, solutions, whether it is smart lighting, smart parking, or whatever, these are quite complex solutions, and using a platform like ours, especially because we do all the operations, so you don't have to, build a lot of this stuff. As I showed you, we provide all the APIs so that the amount of building that you need to do is very minimal. But building is one thing, operating a whole solution is a whole another thing across the globe, 24/7. So using a cloud-based platform like ours actually makes operations easy. So that's another reason why cloud-based backends are kind of preferred in many IoT scenarios. Monetization, it's very easy to roll out newer monetization models. The kit tracker example that I gave you, I'll come back to that, but things like that, like adding an additional service or adding an additional device integration between the kit tracker and some other device, all of these become just very easy to add and maintain if the logic, the interoperability logic is on the cloud side. And also this API enablement is another use case calling for cloud. And the scenario is, there are IoT solutions which are kind of developed providing some particular value. Like in this case, there is a customer of ours using the platform which created a simple device, and all it does is it records temperature, humidity, UV, and a bunch of things, and then uploads to the cloud. But they're using cloud to upload data, analyze, and things like that. But beyond that, they're also using cloud to expose their data and APIs to third parties, so that third parties can be doing something more compelling that they haven't thought of. So the UV information, for example, they're just publishing this information and making the API available. Someone completely that they haven't thought of could be using that, like a cosmetic company might want this UV information, and maybe they're doing, I'm not saying that they are right now, but they might be, using this UV information to create, customized, cosmetics or customized cosmetic buying experience for women, for example. So by API enabling IoT solutions, new complete use cases that a particular company might not have thought of just become possible. So anyway, the role of cloud, there are just many of these, and hope this gave you just a glimpse of some of the possibilities. I mentioned ecosystem before. This is an ecosystem that we have founded called Space. You can check it out later at iotspace.org. And the reason I mentioned this is, I could probably talk about this for half an hour, but let me summarize. Using a platform like ours, and creating like an IoT solution, that's one thing. But then actually being successful with that IoT solution is a whole another thing. And for being successful, you need a channel. What is the channel through which you sell your IoT solution? One of the things that we realized, having worked with a lot of carriers as customers of ours, is that carriers and also retailers, they have a lot of interest in monetizing IoT. And the great thing that they have going on this side is they have captive audience, right? So you and I, like, we are all basically captive audience to carriers like AT&T or Verizon or whoever. So on this side, they have captive audience, they have a lot of interest in monetizing IoT. And on the other side, which is the supply side, this is the demand side. On the supply side, which is basically device manufacturers and IoT solution providers, which are our key customers, they have all these disparate IoT solutions that they are doing. And the ecosystem that we have founded basically serves two purposes. One is, the platform that this ecosystem uses is key platform. So the first purpose is to basically enable the demand side, the carriers, retailers, to pick and choose disparate IoT solutions, and through cloud-based integration, tie those together and create like a unified, compelling solution that these guys can sell to their captive audience, like you and me. So you and I, instead of buying just a text plan, data plan, and a voice plan from a carrier, all of a sudden can buy home security, solution, or personal healthcare wearables and things like this. All these IoT things become new items that they're able to sell. So that's one thing. The other thing is for the device manufacturers, all of a sudden they have like a very well-established, compelling, captive audience kind of channel through these carriers and retailers. So it's a cloud-based hub, so to speak, to create like composite IoT solutions from disparate IoT solutions coming from different device manufacturers, plus a distribution platform. So I thought this is worth mentioning because most of the integration that we are talking about in making these composite IoT solutions it's basically cloud-based integration. So anyway, I'd be happy to talk more about this, after the session, if you're interested. A little bit about apps also, because that's part of the topic. The role apps play, obviously, the straightforward role is, especially in B2C or sort of consumer IoT scenarios, is, well, I bought a IoT solution, like it's a smart light or smart bulb, smart lock, whatever. It comes with an app, and I can do something. I can open the lock with the app, I can turn on the light with the app, and so on and so forth. So every IoT thing now has an app. So the control and visibility kind of use case is just a given. Although there is a lot of debate often about, should we have like one app, a super app which controls everything, or should I get an app for each of the devices and things like that. But whatever it might be, at the end of the day, the focus should be on automation in many scenarios. But anyway, this is a given. Every IoT thing nowadays has some app, that it comes with. But what I want to focus on is, the other aspect of apps, which is monetization. So basically, the apps can be a very good interface for enabling monetization. So back to the example that I was giving you before of Kit Tracker. The Kit Tracker by itself, you pay certain amount of money for the device plus some, dollars per month for the recurring service for tracking, kit tracking. And say, there's another solution which is a smart bulb, which is just, some dollars to buy the bulb. There's no monthly recurring service. But if you put those together, all of a sudden there might be a recurring revenue opportunity even with the bulb service. And this is actually real. I can't give you the actual dollars per month and things like this because this is kind of being worked out. But when the kid is in some sort of a dangerous situation, say in a red zone, or is in you know, he's supposed to be at school, but the kid is moving 50 miles per hour, you know, which might be kidnapping or something. In addition to just sending a notification to the parent, if there is smart bulb integration, then, you know, the bulbs might be flashing red everywhere, like wherever you have put them, you know, in the house or in the office or whatever. And that, as an add-on service, could be valuable, that people are going to pay some you know, dollars per month in addition, you know. And these kinds of things, whether it is this smart bulb integration or the sex offender proximity alerts and things like this, there needs to be a nice interface for these kinds of things to keep showing up, you know, for you to add more services, you know, as a user. And apps provide a perfect mechanism for that, especially because for these kinds of solutions, app is a great interface that parent, in this case, parent uses every day. So, you know, apps do play a big role in sort of enabling monetization. This is the example that I was giving, you know, the SnowFox tracker. So this is an app, and these are the various zones, you know, that parent can set up, and you know exactly what the kids are up to, you know, where they are, you know. It has two-way calling also, so you press the button, you can, you know, ask the parent to call you, or just press the button to indicate that you're done with your class, you know, the parent can pick you up, stuff like that. This is anyway, parent, this is the target audience for this is really elementary school kids, because after middle, you know, come middle school, I think kids nowadays have smartphones with them. So this is more for elementary school. This is another example of cloud and app enabled recurring revenue. Just like this one, this is also recurring revenue. So this is in Japan. This little device, you know, does the normal activity tracking kind of stuff. But in addition, they put a bunch of backend services and app functionality for which they are able to monetize, you know, almost like $5 per month per user, you know, in Japan. For example, if you take this app and move it around your tummy, it calculates visceral fat. Things like this, they did it in Japan. Another example, cloud and app enabled. This company, this is one of the biggest, it's called Yankon. It's one of the biggest LED manufacturers in China. They use our platform, and you know, they use various features of the cloud, you know, of our platform for both on their back end and also in the apps. So I won't go too much detail here. Here's another example of this is an interesting product. It's a wearable, but it also has a disposable wearable component to it. So this is more for athletes, and the disposable part basically analyzes sweat, and from that, you know, the sodium and potassium levels and things like that within sweat. So this is another actually recurring revenue scenario. So what we've talked about is cloud and app, you know, how they, you know, are used in the context of IoT. Now, how to actually build, you know, I just want to talk a little bit about that so that it's more complete. First of all, there are many scenarios in which, you know, the key platform is used. The first is pretty common scenario where there's a, you know, thing that like a, you know, smart bulb or smart camera or whatever connecting to the cloud, and then the cloud offering some services, the backend functionality to manage users, data, things like this. Second is what I call open smart device platforms, where basically the functionality is also exposed through APIs. So it's not just here's a device, here's an app, but it's the case of that UV example that I gave. They're also exposing the data and the analytics for third parties to consume. So that's pretty common nowadays for IoT companies to basically make their solution more usable in different contexts. And then the interoperability, of course, there are a couple of ways to do interoperability. One is through something like all join or through a hub kind of mechanism. And another scenario is where the interoperability logic is all in the cloud. Obviously, depending on the use cases, both types are very relevant, and sometimes they're complementary. To build IoT solutions, you need a lot of these kinds of functionality. These are all the features that we provide in the platform. You guys can look those up, if you're interested in building IoT solutions using a platform like ours. One of for those, the technical audience here, this what we call thing interaction framework, which is part of the platform, is quite interesting. It basically makes the interaction between the thing, the cloud service, and then the app, all of that interaction very easy to program through states, triggers, and commands. With mostly client-side coding, you don't have to do a ton of server-side stuff. So you can, if you go to our doc site, docs.key.com, you'll get a lot of information about how to do this. Another important thing when you are considering building IoT solutions is depending on what type of solution you're building and what kind of company you are, you might need very flexible deployment models. Some companies want our platform to be deployed on premises. Some, we run on Amazon and also on Alibaba on the public cloud side. So some are fine with that, but some want deployment on premises, and some require like dedicated deployment and so on and so forth. So we support all of those. Security is obviously important. There are various aspects of security in the platform, all of which you should consider and leverage when building IoT solutions. Analytics is pretty important, and on the IoT side, there are various things that you might want to analyze, at the device level, the events that the device is producing, the user using the app, what they might be doing in the app, how it correlates to how the device is being used. There are just many, many scenarios. And the key point here is that when you're building an IoT solution, look for a platform that enables you or allows you to create your own metrics. If they say, hey, we give you like these 20 metrics, we think these are very important to you, that's not very useful. Every solution is very unique. So look for a platform that allows you to define your own metrics in your own terms. That's something that we do. And also optimization is important. So it's an iterative process usually, developing and running these kinds of IoT solutions. So the optimization services that we provide in the platform are quite useful. So you should take a look at those as well. So So basically, I want to conclude here and see if you have any questions or comments. If you don't have any questions, I give you the gift of time. So I'll conclude it about 10 to 15 minutes early. All right. Thank you.